And we go. So very good morning to Canada, very good morning to the West Coast, good evening to very late evening to Australia, New Zealand, and Middle East, and good day for our European audience. So we're going to jump into the biopackaging and the bioplastic session that will be introduced by our friend Rudy Koopmans from the PIC Plastic Innovation Competence Center in Switzerland, one of my best biopackaging experts in the world. And then after, we're going to go into the discussion with Jean-Philippe and Franck, and we're going to introduce the panel after the introduction. So, Rudy, the floor is yours, and we're listening carefully to what you want to say.
Okay, thank you, Pierre, for the invitation to give a few words. So what I had planned to do was to give you a bit of a bird's eye view on packaging and biopackaging and all the other words that you may have heard. Actually, I entitled my presentation, All Altruists Gladly Make Gum in Gallon Tanks. And this is a mnemotechnical sentence to memorize with the first letter, all the hexoses in the sugars, mainly glucose, which you obviously have in many of the seaweeds and algae called carbohydrates. So when we talk about packaging, then we tend to see this as a major issue. And you see this because you are every day confronted with packaging. And yes, the packaging world has exploded over the last, I would say, 70 years, because it is a fantastic material in terms of the synthetic polymers that we have been using to basically package our food. But the problem is we don't really want the package, we want typically the content of that. And if you really look at the statistics of packaging, then you will see that the amount of packaging actually has grown exponentially, perfectly in line with the growth of the population. So we have been evolving from the 1950s from something like 2 billion to something like today almost 8 billion people. And this is still continuing, which means packaging is still a necessity. And why is it a necessity? Because at the moment, and these are some recent statistics, the world is throwing away something like 1.3 billion tons of food. So there is a bit of a challenge there to save food. And in other words, we can save the food problem of the world without doing anything more, just to preserve it. But you need to see this also in a bit of a broader context, because packaging, and certainly the plastics that are used for it, are materials, and these materials you need to always associate it with energy. In other words, if you have energy, is something that you need to generate the materials. And this is something that we also tend to forget, that if you want certain materials to do a certain function, you need to keep in mind that the impact that you will have on a sustainable society, because that's what we are, I hope, aiming for, is related to the CO2 emissions. And therefore, the real problems in terms of materials and eventually packaging are related to the energy and the carbon emissions. And if you look at the statistics of carbon emissions, then you can see that at the moment we are something like about 60 gigatons of CO2 emissions per year globally. And if you look at where we need to get, based on the agreements that have been put in place globally, then we need to do actually in the next 30 years 5 times more than what we have done in the last 30 years. So that means we are facing a huge challenge. And this challenge is related certainly to the energy, but also to what kind of materials do we want to have. It is obvious that fossil fuels, and when we talk about fossil fuels, it's not just petroleum, but it's also something like natural gas. And this is certainly something that is more and more coming into the picture in order to create the necessary energy to make the materials from natural gas. So we are faced with a few important challenges, and these challenges are, first of all, what do we do with what we are already having? In other words, the fossil fuel-based plastics that are used for about 40% into packaging. And then we are talking here about something like 160 million tons of packaging materials, mainly polyethylene and polypropylene, but also PET, for example, still a lot of PVC. So what are we doing in the meantime before we are going to a renewable, plant-based, nature-based material to provide us the functionality to save that amount of food and to basically are able to provide it to this large amount of people? Because at the moment, if you think in terms of biopolymers or plastics essentially that are made from a renewable resource or are made from nature as such in terms of the cellulose, then we are talking about something like 2 million tons. In the context of the 400 million tons of the fossil fuel-based plastics, this is essentially peanuts. So that means a long way to go. The immediate question that obviously comes is, are we able to make, is there enough renewable feedstock available to actually make the materials that we have at the moment based on fossil fuel-based feedstock? And the answer to that is very simple. Only in Europe, for example, we are throwing away not just this globally 1.3 billion, but in Europe, if you take all the biomass together, then we are throwing away something like close to 700 million tons of biomass, which is essentially nothing else than carbohydrates, proteins, and some lipids, fats, and these are essential materials that today are also the feedstock for many of the products that we are using based on fossil fuels. So in other words, only in Europe, close to 700 million tons that we are not using. So the potential there is huge. And on top of that, if we are using that, we're also reducing the emissions, because today this is left to rot on the land, this is burned or whatever, which obviously creates CO2 emissions. So having said that, if you now look at the BioMarine and you look at the amount of algae, and if you look at the latest statistics in terms of algae and seaweed that is kind of like cultivated, then there is about an amount of something like 30 million tons available. So you see that if you are starting to focus on packaging, that with the 30 million tons, which today is for a large extent being used also as food, you need to still a long way to go to actually transform your feedstock base into something that at the moment has a volume of something like 160 million tons. On top of that, you need to think about, because typically when they talk about plastic, people say, yeah, let's do paper or cardboard. And indeed, at the moment in the world, we are using something like 210 million tons of paper and cardboard for packaging. So actually, it's the biggest amount of material that's being used in packaging. So having said that, it is possible that there is feedstock for doing the right chemistry to get to the right packaging, to save food, as one thing. On the other hand, it also will benefit the CO2 emissions. And let's not forget that that nature already has given quite a number of examples of packaging food. Think about eggs, or think about a coconut, or think about garlic, which is a kind of like a multi-unit packaging. So, and also think about the exoskeletons of many sea life, like lobster or shrimps or that kind of thing, where you have also these carbohydrate-based molecules, and which we throw away essentially most of it. So in other words, there is certainly enough material available. We just need to challenge transformation into the packaging and certainly learn a lot from nature. So in other words, is it possible? Yes, it is possible, but it's not going to be, I would say, a walk in the park. It's going to be a fairly stony road, and it will require significant investments, because I see at the moment a lot of startups and a lot of people trying to move these kind of materials, these natural polymers forward, and that's certainly an important effort. But the big challenge will come when there are scaling, when there is scaling to be done, and when you need to start to invest in large scale production, which may be associated with actually different kind of business model, because the business models of the agricultural industry today are somewhat different than the business model of the chemical industry today that is using fossil feedstock.
Thank you.
So this is essentially a little bit of the context in which you need to see when you talk about bio-based packaging. You need to see where we are today and where we can potentially go. But I would say it's certainly an important direction to go, certainly an important vision to get eventually to our targets of a net zero carbon neutral environment and a sustainable society, but it will be a stony road.
Thank you, Rudy, for this nice introduction. I'm going to give the floor to Frank, because Frank, I know that you have a board meeting that will start, I guess, around 2 or 3, 2. And so I'd like, still to you to make an introduction. Where do you come from, and what you're doing now, and why it's important, to understand the global picture from a global corporation point of view. And after Jean-Philippe, I will give you the floor. Frank, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you. I hope everybody can hear me. So maybe a quick introduction to myself. I have recently joined Amcor to look after their corporate venturing activities, which means we are looking for investments into startups in the packaging area. Prior to that, I've been 18 years with Nestle, looking from the end user or from the customer point of view, also into packaging when it comes to open innovation. The interesting thing, and that's probably the key perspective on what we are currently seeing, and it has been mentioned by Rudy, packaging per se is here to preserve and to protect the products we sell. And as the packaging is good, if it's really good, we have less spoilage. I think this is very important to keep that in mind. On the other side, beside all of the activities and the pressure, the today developed packaging solutions, which are mainly plastics, have been optimized on performance, on cost, and also even on material usage. And just to remind you, you may recall, if you have bought a PET water bottle 10 years ago, and if you compare it to what you have today, you see, for example, that the materials have been thinner and thinner and thinner. And it has been, of course, optimized to production, so limited capital footprint. And I believe this is now the challenging moving forward. So what are the materials which are on one side are able to make the sustainable footprint, and on the other side are able to be competitive to the existing solutions? And I believe that and there are two questions to it. The one question is, who can pick it up, or is there enough feedstock in order to make the complete shift? And the other question, which I think Rudy addressed and showed it, and the other question is, who are the brand owners, who are the customers who are really willing to scale it up? And here, I think it might be also customers who have a scale, but who have premium products, who can afford more expensive packaging to get in, to have a claim around the sustainability. So I believe this is what we are looking for, is on one side, let's say, performance, and on the other side also being cost competitive as we move forward while maintaining the sustainability.
And good introduction, Frank. Jean-Philippe, so we're still expecting Cédric from L'Oréal in charge of packaging, but he's lost in translation and maybe has, some issue connecting. Cédric, if you listen to me, send me a text and maybe Vero can help you to log in. So Jean-Philippe, tell us more about you. You're on the other side of the pond in Quebec, in Trois-Rivières. Who you are, who are you, and what are you doing?
Good. So thank you, Pierre. Hello, everybody. My name is Jean-Philippe Jacques. I am the general manager of Innofibre. So Innofibre is an applied research center. We are based in Canada, Quebec, and we are doing research with an industrial partner to develop innovative packaging. So basically, Innofibre, we have a pilot plan to develop products, bio-based product, bio-packaging, with different kind of feedstock. We are using cellulose. Is it our first feedstock that we are using? Cellulose from the forestry, from the agriculture. We also use some resources from the sea, and basically we want to develop 100% recycle or compostable bio packaging. So there's a challenge there, of course, to develop innovative packaging. Also, what Frank said, that we have to develop packaging with a cost-effective and a good performance. The cost-effective, I think, is the biggest challenge that we have, because for the same performance, is it possible to do it? But I think that when we develop some bio packaging, we can have more value to them packaging. For example, is it possible to develop bioactive packaging? So imagine that you are using some packaging for food, and the packaging help to preserve the food maybe a couple of days. That's supposed to do. So this is some plus value that it could be very interesting. With the cellulose, is it in Canada? Or the pulp and paper sector is very present. Is it a huge industrial sector? And the first product that they produced here in Canada, it was the newsprint, and everybody knows that the newsprint is going down because we have electronic device, and all the world is looking the news on their laptop or iPad. But this means that the forestry resources is there. So is it interesting to consider it? And also to develop innovative bio-based packaging, is it interesting to consider the co-products, the organic co-products, and other waste biomass that could have some interesting molecule that we can use to develop bioplastic or biopackaging. And this is what we are doing with industrial partner. So just to show you some packaging. So look, is it packaging for a tray for food? It's 100% recycled or compostable. It's made from miscanthus, an agricultural biomass. This other one, you look the green color, so it's a mix of cellulose and algae. Is it very interesting? And I don't know if you can see this one, but there is some orange spot inside. So is it some residues of food sector mixed with cellulose? So the challenge to develop an innovative biopackaging, we can do it, we can achieve it, and the big challenge is to see, does the customer is ready to pay a little bit more for biopackaging, and the cost is still our main challenge every day.
So sorry, I was on mute. So this is a very good start, for our discussion. And let me start. Let me rewind a little bit. So we have two issues. We won't get rid of plastic, before maybe 10, 20 years. Plastic will be still there. I mean, fossil carbon plastic. So there is a need, to develop this new sector coming from natural polymer and seaweed, because this is the topic of the session today. So how are we going to start to plan ahead, and what are the mandatory steps from a research, a collaborative institution, and from a corporate point of view? Frank, can you start, to answer me? You're on mute.
I think what we need to realize, we should come always from the protection of the product. So I think important is, do we get the right boundary conditions in place? People are thinking about to revisit shelf lives. How long should products be able to do there? But one of the key challenges we should not forget of these high performance materials we have today are these boundary conditions when it comes to UV light, oxygen barrier, and ultimately moisture. And that is one of the key things. And then related to different pH values, which we have in the products. And now that's for me the starting point, to get at the end applications which have a similar delivery point to it. And then the next question is, what is the end of life? And I think here again, where we would go is towards either, is it compostable, is it recyclable, is it biodegradable? And the solutions need to fit into these streams. I mean, we can think about biomaterial, which then may pollute the current existing recycling streams. So for me, these are the two elements to consider. First, really, is the performance delivering on the usage of the packaging? And secondly, are we honest enough when it comes to end of life? Do we know exactly what happens in the current infrastructure? Because that's the moment where people take it up. And I give you an example. There may be brand owners who are willing to put a compostable film to replace their current films with a compostable film. But if the recycler or the composters in a specific country suddenly saying we do not accept any kind of films, the claim cannot be made.
This is very, very interesting. So let me introduce you to Cédric. He's the director, for innovation in terms of packaging at L'Oréal. And Cédric, so maybe you can introduce yourself. And we were talking about the mandatory step to develop this new, I would say, sector, and how we're going to structure the relationship between the producer, the transformers, and the big industry. So I give you a few minutes maybe to introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah. The first thing, sorry for being so late. I had a big issue with my computer and I needed almost 20 minutes to try to restart it due to the hot weather in France. It's something that never happened to me, and it was not at the right time that it happened to me. Then a really, really big sorry for this. Then yeah, I'm Cédric Dever. I'm in charge of the strategy for the plastic that are used in the packaging for the L'Oréal group. We're as a brand owner, we are using plastic for our packaging. And like many people, we are looking to alternative. What can we replace in order to replace the plastics that we are using in our packaging? It's sure that algae resources may be a good option. And what I hear just before is very interesting, because what is important is also the end of life of the packaging. If we are using algae in order to produce a packaging, what would be the end of life? Because today, as L'Oréal signed some years ago the global commitment from Ellen MacArthur, and then as a brand owner, 100% of our plastic packaging will be recyclable, compostable, or reusable. Then meaning that if we're in the definition of a plastic, there is a polymer that is used in addition with the algae, it's sure that we have to be very careful about the end of life. Today, when we are looking at also the definition of what is a plastic, there is the last version of the directive on the single-use plastic that was published, if I remember well, this week, and it is clearly stated that natural polymer that are not modified chemically are considered as non-plastic solution are not part of the single-use plastic directive. Meaning that if we are using, for instance, algae in conjunction, in blend with PE, PP, or PET, we will be in the definition of plastic, and this would not be recyclable. Then it would be an issue for us. But if you are extracting from this algae a natural polymer that is not chemically modified, you are not part of this directive, and then you are opening the door to something new, non-plastic solution. But same thing, what are we going to do at the end of life if we are using it as a single-use plastic, as a single-use packaging, sorry. A very long introduction, but I don't know if all these topics has been covered, but...
we didn't have time, to go that far. And
okay, sorry. Sorry for it.
No, it's okay, Cédric. And as you were not connecting, I was a little bit worried. And I have a surprise guest, that will join us in 5 minutes. And I think it will foster the discussion. So, Frank, I know that you have a board meeting, so you tell me when you want to leave. There's no pressure on your side. But let's go, through the different steps. And so we understand that there might be some bottlenecks if we want to organize, the sector. And one of the bottleneck will be the end of life. And you mentioned that, Rudy. And what are, the perspective in terms of preparing the step, for this end of life, especially in regard of the seaweed bioplastic?
Well, I think in all this discussion, we always tend to forget the consumer. I mean, us. So companies think as companies, and then suddenly they forget they themselves are consumers. And I challenge anybody on this forum to know, if they buy a product, to identify what it is and what they need to do with it. Now, in Switzerland, it's made suddenly very easy. You have one bag or one bin, and you throw everything in the same bin, and it's burned. Now, that's not really the solution. So you see that, and then you can start to say, yeah, we need to educate the consumer, and we need to do this and that. But that's also not the solution. There are consumers that are, there are people, we're all consumers. There are people that are willing to do something, but there are people that will never willing to do something. So how do you deal with that? And I think there is certainly already legislation, as was already mentioned, in place, because that comes back to what are the steps to be taken. The industry will be forced, and actually is being forced to do something. Unfortunately, there is a lot of force, but there is no solution yet. And the challenge is to find out the route, how to go from where we are to where we want to be. But I think the only way to do this is to engage the full value chain, and in other words, you need to partner with the guys that will deliver your feedstock, the guys that transform your feedstock into a product, the guys that are kind of like branding it and selling it in a distribution system, a retailer, and so on. And then also the consumers, because these are the people that are ending up with a problem. And on top of that, it's the public responsibility then to collect everything, and the public responsibility to develop the recycling. And this applies both to bio-based materials or petroleum-based materials. So either you simplify this, so go to less type of products, but if you're now introducing a bio-based material, nobody was able to introduce that, to understand what it is or what to do with it. And the solution is not really, let's compost everything. Let's not forget that composting everything will introduce a lot of methane and CO2. So also there you have a few challenges to think about. But to me, the steps that need to be taken is the companies need to start talking to each other more, which they don't do at the moment to the extent that is necessary, because they need to open themselves to say, what is my real problem? And forget a little bit about intellectual property. So and then also engage the consumer or the public in general in ways where there are technologies today which make it actually possible.
For that, allow me to introduce you to Aisha, and she will quickly, you know, go around and explain who's Solid Blue, what is Solid Blue. I decided to invite her because she might be relevant, and I was wondering if Cédric would join us. So Aisha, 2 minutes. Tell us who you are, tell us what Solid Blue is doing, and then after I have a question for Jean-Philippe.
Thanks very much, Pierre, for the invitation. Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha, CEO and co-founder of Solid Blue. At Solid Blue, we have developed a very innovative seaweed-based biopolymer that is completely natural, that biodegrades benignly in natural conditions, even in sea conditions. As an additional benefit, it also extends shelf life and freshness for fresh food. Currently, we can make structural containers as well as flexible films, and we're in a stage that we are working on scaling our technology to be able to do pilot trials in the market. And the difference that we bring with natural polymers is different than PLA type of bioplastics that, you know, even when we think about how this type of so-called compostable alternatives in the market that's available, they don't actually biodegrade in ocean conditions. But when we develop a natural material such as Solid Blue, which is even edible and digestible material, it can basically doesn't do harm to ocean life or the natural world when it is you know, composted or accidentally leaks into this type of environments. And our idea is that we would like to capture any food waste if it's used in the food industry, so that it gives basically an inclusive design to end user. They don't have to separate their food waste from their packaging container, and everything can be placed in a composting bin, so that we can return all of the ingredients and nutrients back to soil. So that's our solution.
For this quick introduction, and so that leads me, you know, to the next question to you, Jean-Philippe. So, as an industry, we bring innovation from the public labs. We bring investors. We bring corporates such as L'Oréal. And how do we function, and how we can prepare the ground for the next generation packaging that will be algae, seaweed, or biomass? So what are the mandatory steps at your level to make sure that we can deliver, and what are the bottlenecks that we need immediately to start to work on?
So as a research center, we are doing research with industrial partners. So our mission is to accelerate the technological development, and we can produce some prototype of biopackaging. So at first, it is very important to have a collaboration, a collaborative partnership. What I mean by that is that we, Innofibre, we have an expertise in research. We have an expertise in the development of cellulosic products, and our customer have a good expertise and a good knowledge of the market. So is it important to have, because you know, when we want to develop new product, they have a risk on the technological, and there's also a risk on the commercialization. And is it very important to have a good communication to really understand where we go and what would be the issue and what the customer, the end user wants. So this is the first thing. And also in Canada, there's a lot of research centers like us, and we can do some lever. There's some grant that we can apply, federal and provincial government. So it's going to help the development of new project. What we see presently is that we develop some interesting packaging, and is it an innovative technology, and we're looking for a production of this kind of technology. Presently, the pulp and paper sector is a sector where they want a huge quantity of product. And when we are talking about thermoforming product, for example, it's not interesting for them because it's too small. And it's there that it is very important to work with the SME, small and medium enterprise, because they would be more innovative. They would be ready to start a market. They would be there to develop the market, and for a small volume. And also the research. I think that a key of success also is to do a research project or development with a lot of, not a lot, but maybe the end user, and also maybe another trade partner who will be produce it. And in the research, is it important to collaborate with other one? Because, you know, we have an expertise in cellulose, some other research center have other expertise that is complementary to us. And I think like this, we can go faster and to develop a bio-based project. And another thing also, we mentioned that it is important to achieve the performance of the packaging. So that's real, but I think that the main issue is how we can achieve the same performance with the same cost effective. This is really the challenge that we have. And in Canada also, if what could be helpful, because I know that in Europe it's probably not the same situation, but I think that we have to establish some law or some ambitious goal from the government to say we want to switch to bio-based packaging, where we will be possible to recycle it, and it could be helpful for us.
This is very interesting and timely, but because in the previous session, not the previous, the one before, we're talking about investment, and I asked the question to John from this Thompson about the future biopackaging, and he was really confident that the seaweed biopackaging an important role, in the future of the industry of the packaging. And that now my question is more directly addressed to Cédric. Cédric, it's all about fine-tuning the cooperations, and we have two research centers which are slightly different. We have one SME. You represent the corporate world. Aisha has been doing a lot of work with corporates and working also with Rudy on fine-tuning the coating aspect for the polymer. So how do you work with such an innovative company? How do you structure the collaboration, and what does it take if we want to develop an entire I would say value chain for L'Oréal maybe one day to get a full range of seaweed packaging?
Okay, thanks. We have some expertise in collaborating with startup companies on new materials or new technologies. Usually the way of working is that we need all the value chain. I think it's very important to have from the feedstock, then meaning from the algae to the end of life, that we need to have all the partners around the table in order to have a collaborative partnership in order to make it happen. Because when we don't have all the parties, usually it doesn't work. And what is important also is that even if L'Oréal is in terms of naming, it's a very important brand, but in terms of volumes, we are a small players. Then usually what we are doing also in order to support the investment, we are bringing also other brand owners in order to consolidate, to be sure that there are enough volumes to make it happen. Usually when we're speaking about, it's a totally different topic, but when we are speaking about plastic recycling, we are speaking about potentially hundreds of millions of euros of investment. And then it's important that also all the brand owners are there, but also that all the value chain is there, and to have a collaborative approach. Then it is why we like the approach of a consortium, in order that all the parties are around the table, that there is a steering committee, and there are various working groups dedicated to industrialization, to the feedstock securization, because it's very important to secure the upfront, but also the downfront, in order to have the more chance to succeed. I would say that a very key point with these new materials would be really, the end of life, because there is such a strong focus on recyclability, compostability, reusability. It's how can we make it happen on taking into account this kind of end of life.
Very interesting. And I have both a question for Aisha and for Rudy. Rudy, when we started, with the introduction, we mentioned that we will need a lot of capital, to implement, this new vision in the future, and we need also more, intense cooperation. You've been working and discussing with SoluBlue on how we can fine-tune the polymers. So the idea of the consortium should be self-implemented, I would say, in the future, because there is no way that one individual player will succeed in the field, except, if it's maybe even L'Oreal, you're not going alone, on this path. So how do you see, this type of collaboration? And I know that we spend a lot of time trying to imagine, the best way to collaborate.
Well, I think it's there are several elements that need to come together here. First of all, each individual partner in the consortium needs to understand what their specific role is, and obviously also has the competence to do that. And then I think a key element is that there is within the consortium a mutual trust of what people are going to do, what they can do, so that there is so that this works, that there is a good flow of information, communication, and so on. And obviously, for the consortium, it needs to be extremely clear what the target is and what would we define as success, so that everybody can understand what their success is going to be as part of the, let's say, the big success. So I think these are a few elements that one needs to put in place, besides the competence, of course, of the individual parties, and also the clarity of what they represent.
And Aisha, based on your current experience developing this partnership with the large industry, how do you see, the best way to approach this partnership? You're bringing innovation. You need more, I would say, innovation coming from Innofibre or Peak in order to fulfill the requirement from the industry, and maybe L'Oreal, why not? So how do you anticipate this, and what is your main goal and objective?
Yes, I think what we are experiencing as a company is, while working with or talking with big corporates, is they are very slow with innovation. Hence, we are here to do more innovative work and more experimental work in terms of material side, and it's very encouraging that a big corporate's supporting you and saying that what you are doing is great, and we are very interested in what we are doing. So this is very encouraging to have. But we need more support than that. For example, we need more speed. Some corporates that we are talking to, they are moving very slow, and they want all the data that they need, because they kind of stuck with the little details that they want to overcome, because in order to get anything approved in the organization, it has to go through a lot of people to get that right. We understand that. But in terms of bringing this type of innovation that our world really needs to cope with our waste management, it needs acceleration. And like Rudy said, it really needs cooperative gathering, and all these organizations supporting each other. And we really need to accelerate this. As a small startup, we need flexibility, we need support, we need information and cooperation from everyone, really, from big corporates to end users, to make this happen.
Yeah, maybe I want to add also to that. Often it's like, it will require obviously also funding, money to make that happen. And I think typically what companies are I personally feel from my past experience make a huge mistake is that they always see this investment as a kind of like a cost, an additional cost, which is the first to be cut when business, the classical, is not going in the right direction. I think these things need to be looked at in a very different way. It is essentially talking about renewability of your own company and the fact that you're going to be more agile and adaptable to a new world and new boundary conditions within which to operate. So it's an investment in the future. And by the way, the cost of your partners is often far lower than your internal cost as large corporations, where nobody looks at it. I mean, it's like you pay a lot for the people, your own people, but then if you compare that with what you need to pay for the people outside, then it's significantly less. So I think this is also an important element to. It's also a mindset that one needs to put in place, and there needs to be a willingness, and that to your point, there needs to be engagement. It's not about throw something over the fence and then I will throw something back. It's good or it's not good or something. It's really this dialogue that needs to be stimulated.
So Cédric, I want to bounce on your idea when you mentioned the consortium, and at BioMarine we've been trying to push this consortia a lot, for the bioplastic development. But if we want to make it, a reality, where do we start? And there is also a question we need to solve, and maybe Solublue is the only one that has answered, the question so far. Say they want to develop biopolymers from seaweed, but they were the first one to secure the source of biopolymer. And there's not a lot of companies around that are producing innovative, components that have secured the source. So where do we start if we want to build this consortium, and what will be, the next step?
I think the first thing is on our side would be just to verify if there are some, if we can meet all our commitments, because today L'Oréal is having various commitments in the field of the materials that are used for our packaging. There are some commitments that are dedicated to the end of life of the materials, some commitments that are dedicated to the origin of the material. Some commitments are connected to the life cycle assessment of the material. And the difficulty usually with startup is that we're asking a full FC analysis of something that should be at commercial scale. And the startup is proposing something that is promising, but today we don't know yet. It seems the dream is there, but we need to be sure that the dream would become reality in 5 years. And we need to accept that it would take some time. We need to accept that it's also, it may be risky. We need to de-risk the situation and to identify other risks. But what is important, it's to understand that like it has been said, a startup is like a very small boat. You can change of direction very easily, whereas a big corporation is not as agile, even if we would like to be, but we are not as agile as a startup. Then we need to have a dialogue. And I think Rudy was right about speaking about this dialogue. It's very important to understand each other. It's very stupid to say something like this, but it's really the case, because sometimes there are some misunderstanding that is created. And after this misunderstanding can create huge consequences after on the delivery of the program. But I would say the first thing is there is a dream, but we have to assess this, and it's not very easy to see what are the risks that would be associated with, let's team up with a startup that is currently at a pilot scale. It's not at a commercial scale. There is a path that would take 5 years, and how can we make it happen? But we need first to see if we are at least it fits in all our commitments that we are having in the following years for the materials at L'Oréal.
Interesting. Maybe Jean-Philippe, I will give you the floor to explain our initiative in November in Quebec, in Trois-Rivières. And I would like you to go back a little bit to explain the background and why we decided, to partner with you to organize this États généraux du biopackaging in Quebec and bringing so many international partners. So I give you 1 or 2 minutes maybe to explain what is at stake and to see, the global vision, because we're going to talk about packaging, future biomaterial. So what is really at stake and what Canada, Quebec, and Trois-Rivières are aiming to do in correlation with what Cédric is explaining at L'Oréal level. Can you elaborate on this?
Yes, of course. So historically, Three Rivers was the capital of pulp and paper in Canada, and we reproduce tons and millions of tons of paper. And as everybody know, the newsprint dropped, and now we are the region must to look for future. So what we identify like an opportunity, it's that we will want to be the new capital of the bioproducts. So what we mean is that we want to develop a hub of bioproducts where we'll have the research center, we will have some industrial partner, and of course some manufacturer to transform to produce the new bio-based product. And about the research center, they will have a lot of institution, university, collegiate institution like us, and we really want to work on all the supply chain, from the feedstock, from the harvest of the biomass of the feedstock to the development of the end products. So this is our vision. This is where we want to go, and the activity that we organize with Pierre in this fall, we want to present our vision, but also to invite all the company, all the institution to work with us, to come in Three Rivers, to put a feet on the ground and to work with us. Because, in Canada, we have, it's a good place for the feedstock, not maybe about the marine resources, but forestry, agriculture. We also have a good expertise on that. And what we like is to, the bio-based product is not regional challenge. It's a world challenge, and we don't have all the expertise to achieve our goals that we want, and we don't know all the markets. So this is why that we want to develop international collaboration with other companies to accelerate the transition of the biopackaging. So this is our vision, and we invite all the company, the consultant who are interested in to do some business with industry in Canada, or they are looking for an opportunity to build a new facility. The city of Three Rivers is a proactive city. They want to invite the clean tech and how the company wants to develop bio-based product.
I think this will be a good opportunity, and we will invite Rudy, we will invite Cédric and Aisha, of course, especially now that Aisha is looking to Canada as the next place for her to expand. So this is very important, and unfortunately Frank dropped because they had a board meeting, but Amcor is also an important partner that we need to involve in the future thinking and development of this biopackaging vision. And when we say biopackaging, it's for food, it's for cosmetic, but it's also for advanced biomaterials such as space or airline industries. We come back to this. And the potential is enormous. We need to structure the sector and the raw material production. This is one key element. But the beauty is that you have an holistic view. And when Rudy started the introduction talking about the different sources of feedstock, we need to be totally open-minded and think about the future of bio-based material as a non-exclusive side. Of course, seaweed is an important component, but it will, account for maybe 10, 20% when it grows. And we have enormous feedstock. We have enormous, recycling to do and reusing about this. And it's also about the composites. I know that Asia has done, composite between cork and and seaweed biopolymers. So this is also the future. And I'd really like, to use this session as one of the keystones, for building up, this consortium that Cédric mentioned. And we did it, in the past with Frank when it was at Nestlé. And I think that the momentum is good, and there is a real opportunity to get together into the right direction. So before we close the session, I would say, what will be your takeaway message? And I will start with Cédric, which represents, the large corporate industry. You're on mute, Cédric.
It was a good way of thinking on gaining some seconds before speaking. What I can say is that there is a strong demand to move out of the plastics and to move to something that would be more sustainable. Then there is a strong opportunity on the algae resources on how to make it happen. But what would be sorry to repeat this, but what would be important, it would be also the end of life and having also life cycle assessment to show that is the right material to do, because we need facts, and we need really facts, not just feelings that it seems to be better than classical materials.
Jean-Philippe, your takeaway message.
My takeaway message is that we have everything to achieve our goals. So we have some research center, we have some ambitious large company like L'Oréal, we are a startup also that they are more agile and innovative. So we have everything to develop the bio-based packaging. We must be willing and to really believe in what we want and where we want to go. And the collaboration, it's a must to develop the bio-based packaging and to achieve it, to change the idea and find a solution.
Isha, there's a lot of work coming for you. So what will be the next step and your takeaway message?
I think for us, future is biomaterials. These are endless. Almost everything we are coming up with, new ideas and solutions for. Talking to, and we are very pleased that big industries, big sectors, they want to see a solution. They want to see truly compatible natural polymers alternative here, and we are pushing ourselves to technology and to market. But of course, my takeaway from that support everyone gathering and supporting each other, especially small startups that trying to make a change.
And finally, Rudy, what would be the positive message that we're going to carry out of this session?
Well, I think there is certainly a lot of opportunity in the future for a regenerative and probably a distributive type of industry that we need to develop, and we are working on that. There is still a long road to go, but that creates opportunities. And the other thing I would say is, let's not make the same mistakes as we have done in the past 70 years with the fossil fuel-based plastics. And cheap is not necessarily the answer.
I'd like to replicate, the answer from Vincent Duméziel from a previous session. Say, we need to think positive, and we don't want, to replicate, the mistake, because the society has changed, and we have young entrepreneurs driving us, to the limit, pushing us to the limit, and I think that this is the normal way forward. So I think that we need to guide them, we need, to support them, and we need, to encourage them to go and push, the limits. So that will be the final word. I will invite you to join us. It's on the 17th and 18th of November in Trois-Rivières. I don't know if you know Trois-Rivières, but it's a cool place to be. And there will be both physical and virtual meetings. We're going to have one-to-one meetings. We're going to have 3 very interesting sessions talking about bioplastic and biopackaging. I hope you guys will be on board. Most definitely, you'll be invited. And thank you so much, for this interesting discussion. And let's make it happen.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Thank you very much.